It's the cost of woke, and it broke the Walt Disney Company. Today we have attorney Ron Coleman here, a man who has won at the highest levels, even arguing with victory in front of the Supreme Court of the United States. Today he's taking it to the House of Mouse. Bob Iger, Josh D'Amaro, Dana Walden, and all the other leadership, what they did to Marvel, what they did to Star Wars, what they did to animation, he understands why they destroyed their brands and the belief from fans. It's a great day, folks, to be here right again on the Pro Channel. And we're happy because you're here with us. The dream to stream only comes true because of you. We're not on YouTube without the superstars. Yes, it's an attitude of gratitude every time you click on one of our videos. Folks, let's jump into the conversation right now with Ron Coleman. He's got lots to say about where Disney went astray. We'll start it right now. On the way out the door, Bob Iger was sure he had a winning strategy. And, one Ron Coleman on the panel right now is taking that on with an article called The Fallacy of Abundance. Abandonment. Turns out the bare necessities, look for those, included quality control. It says, let's start by being fair to Disney. At some point earlier than a lot of other companies, it realized that leveraging intellectual property is the best business there is. You make a character once, people fall in love with it, they pay you for iterations and stuff that delivers that character more or less forever. On the screen, on the lunchbox, on the bed sheets, on a $9 churro in Orlando. Rinse and repeat across generations. And no money center bank ever owned more of these little ATMs than Disney, or had built anything like the apparatus Disney built around them. Parks, cruises, streaming, licensing, spin-offs, remakes. So the studio could afford to miss in a way nobody else could. When you can bankroll a movie with the line for Space Mountain, you can eat a box office flop that would put a normal studio into Chapter 11. So when Disney decided...
You just referred to.
We're on the same page.
Just talking about that cross-subsidization. That's right.
It says, so when Disney decided it could take the library it spent 9 years building and retrofit it for modern audiences, recast it, reboot it, lecture it, the decision was far from crazy. It was canny as The company had a vault stuffed with goodwill, and history showed it could draw on that vault approximately forever. This goes on to talk about, Ron, how the strategy that they came up with actually did not succeed in the long run and has decreased the value of their brands. Ron, walk us through what it is your thesis about Disney and what should people be looking forward to reading out of the article here.
The thesis is that this is another an example of something that we see throughout modern society, and it's not unique to modern society, but it's more prevalent in modern society because I call it the fallacy of abundance. This idea that there is a well of, whether it's brand equity or financial equity or professional competence or military strength, we have so much of something that we don't have to invest in it, that we don't have to worry about replenishing it, about upgrading it. We can afford DEI. We can afford to have people who've only ever been an actress write their first ever movie for a major studio with a $100 million plus budget. We can afford that because we're floating on air. Money grows from trees. It's not merely the fact that these are bad decisions. They're premised on this idea that we can never go broke. We can never run out of what it is that makes us so wealthy. And you, as I said in the beginning of the article, you can always assume, if you're Disney, that Mickey Mouse will always be Mickey Mouse and the Marvels will always be the Marvels. And they have gone out of their way, as I've discussed on your show so many times, and Valiant. These guys have demonstrated that you can, in fact, run out of brand equity by destroying the brand. They're drawing, it's an economics metaphor because that was my major in college, and it gave me a way of looking at the world. They're drawing on principle instead of equity. When you have equity like the Disney catalog, all the IP they own, you should be living off interest. You should be living off the fruits of that equity, not destroying it. And when you do these race swaps and these gender swaps, or just plain release garbage content that you believe by virtue of franchise power, and in fact, I use the metaphor in the article of a franchise. If you buy a McDonald's franchise and you decide not to follow the standard operating procedures for making a Big Mac, because you figure, listen, well, I could just put cardboard in there. Why should I put beef in there? they're going to buy it anyway because it says McDonald's, right? Well, that will work for the first couple of days. But you're harming McDonald's and you're harming yourself, because what you're doing is you're separating the customer expectation of quality from the experience. That it's impossible not, I mean, you know, and the irony of what happened with Supergirl is this wasn't even a particularly good property. This wasn't a franchise property. This was a marginal property. But they couldn't resist to act as if it were still 2021, 2022. And I know that the scripts and the productions go back years, but I mean, to release this movie in 2026 after what we saw happen to Snow White and after what's happened in the Marvel universe, to be so tone deaf and to think that it's okay, it's the DC franchise. What could go wrong? We see what could go wrong. It doesn't just ruin this movie. It ruins the entire enterprise. And I mean, again, like when we get to that point, I'm saying stuff that you guys have been saying for years, including back in the days when WDW stood for Walt Disney World.
Who knows, Ron? It's a mystery. I don't know if that's true, but Ron, I want to ask you about this. Okay, so in the Chiron below, I'm talking about the issue with woke, right? It says the cost of woke, and so I want to ask you about that in combination with what you're talking about, because it seems to me that partly why they've had to depend so heavily on these franchises that they built up over a century, right? And all this goodwill. You know, Snow White is not something they went back to the well again over and over. They had it. People liked it. They used it in the parks, but they didn't keep making a lot of Snow White movies. Suddenly, when they went into this woke era, this postmodern neo-Marxist era, where they hired a lot of people who no longer believed in traditional storytelling, they wanted to invert the hero's journey. They didn't want to tell the kinds of tales that we've been telling for thousands of years. And when that happened, Ron, suddenly all the new content basically it failed. I mean, there have been a few exceptions like Encanto and Moana, maybe Coco, but the vast majority of these things have gone the way of Strange World and Lightyear, and people utterly rejected it. So, Ron, I think that the woke aspect of this is what caused a lot of these companies to have to go back to what they had built over 100 years and just squeeze that dry, just absolutely milk that to no end. And I think that is what has been so damaging, is the necessity, the need for the assembly line of sequels as a part of, we can't make new content and we don't have people who know what to do with new content.
You're 100% right. And the only reason you can be insulated, see, here's the thing. You might decide that that's something you need to do because this year we need, we need a Superman movie. So it'll be Supergirl, fine. That's short-term thinking. That's bad economics. That's bad management. And you've been on panels with me, and I've discussed this with Valiant many times. And I've also asked this to others on my own show who are business people and economically oriented. Why do boards of directors let this happen? It's bad management. It's not good sense. And in the case of Disney, it happens because they're insulated by the cash flow. If they were running a real business, if it were a McDonald's franchise and the customers started dropping off, and the equity owner, which is different, this is not, that's in a real franchise, right? In a real franchise, the franchisee, I mean, maybe I've actually thought of an interesting angle on this as I'm talking to you. In a real franchise, the franchisee and the franchisor are not the same person. So they have different incentives to protect the brand, but those interests converge. Here, the board of directors is supposed to be the franchisor. They're supposed to be the guys who say, we're not going to let you make these bad decisions and just let woke run the operation, because we are the stewards of the property.
Right. I think this has to go back to that interference level of too much bureaucracy. The whole Wall Street model is probably to blame for most of our entertainment woes right now, because you get a bunch of people that are interested in other things other than profit. You can get people coming in and these business managers who say, yeah, we're going to go for this new segment of the population because there's going to be more gays, or which is pretty much the McKinsey promise there when they come in and say something like this. Or Larry.
And then you have activists like BlackRock, right? And they're the guys writing the checks. They're the institutional investors. So you would expect in economic theory that they would be the ones who would be the least inclined to say, put your brand on the line.
Exactly.
So why don't they? Because of the fallacy. Because of the fallacy that we can afford. We are enlightened, and we can afford to not maximize profits. I mean, there's something. I mean, let's put it this way, Jonas. You just said they're interested in other things besides profits.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, movie studios used to be accused when they were independent of being interested in something other than art. And of course they were. They were businesses. They made tremendous profits, and they always will. The profits, but the further you get from that guy who really does care about the profits, like you said, there's this bureaucracy, and then there's not only an internal bureaucracy, and as I've said many times when it comes to Disney, there's both an internal bureaucracy and a very, very acute culture of woke that is grassroots fed in that particular organization. They have all these other interests, and what enlightened person, including students of economics such as myself, hasn't said, wouldn't it be great if you didn't always make artistic decisions based on absolutely maximizing profit? And there's something to that. You know, what if instead of making $500 million on a movie, you made $480 million on a movie, and it was $20 million better? And, you know, we in economics, I'm not an economist, I'm a lawyer, but in economics, they say, you know, how can you measure what they call utiles, units of goodness, other than in money? And we try to find ways to do that. It's hard to capture. One way you can capture it is by saying, if I make a better movie, I build the brand, I build the equity in the brand, so that next time I've got a better product that I can actually draw more fruit from, that I can get more interest from, that spins off more. But what we've done instead is said, nah, our well is so deep that we can keep pulling from it and pulling from it and pulling from it, and we can achieve other things. And going back to your main point, we can achieve things that have absolutely nothing to do with the creative and nothing to do with profits, but have to do with social urges and sociological phenomena that we want to be part of. And a response to that might be, remember when we talked about the Gina
Carano
case? And Disney's argument was, we wanted to fire her, and we should have been allowed to fire her under California law because she was hurting our brand with the mean things she was saying. She was hurting our brand. So all right, but the point is, there is an argument that says, if we do woke things, people are going to love our brand more. They're going to love our brand. So, Ron, what do you mean drawing down on the equity? We're building the equity. It didn't happen. It didn't happen because they lost touch with what they were doing. The creativity, they forgot who their audience was. And they forgot that ultimately it's the audience that makes this decision, not college professors and not the access media, and not even, you know, a Nerdrotic and Pro and, you know, all the guys and Nat. It's the audience, the people who do or don't show up at the theaters. They blew that, and they did it because they assumed that it didn't matter.
So let's talk about that theory. And I think we're watching it happen right now, Nat. Moana was a huge hit for Disney. think it came out in 2016. That would have meant that it went into production before the woke era, 2013-ish, 2012. And it was the most streamed movie, not just on Disney Plus, but on any stream platform for years. I mean, this was the top girls brand. And Bob Iger decided, well, what if we take a TV show we've been working on and we just retrofit that into a movie? And it was very poorly received, but it made more than $1 billion. So this goes to Ron's point. That movie economically is a giant triumph in terms of brand equity. It was devastating. Now they're coming out, Nat, with this one, the live action Moana, the next year with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and all that. And this is looking like it's going to be an utter disaster for Disney. So this speaks to that exact phenomenon that Ron's talking about.
And so does his career.
Well, that too. But Nat, what are your thoughts on this idea? Maybe they need to hire Ron as a consultant and say, wait a minute. It's not just about short-term financial gains. It's about the long-term brand equity.
True. And I also think in a way, in talking about, for example, and I like the idea that they are destroying their actual equity and how much money they can make. But I think they also made, and many businesses, not just Disney, but a lot in Hollywood, made this decision of, instead of also just focusing on or finding the answer in, oh, they're just doing it for profit, or they're also kind of ideologically power tripping. So they want to use these franchises to as a vehicle to bring in their new ideology, mostly Marxist and communist, and the new ideas that they've had and that they've been taught themselves by the education system that has also been captured. So it's been like a snowball effect where now beloved franchises are also being used for ego and power trips of the people that have gotten into those positions of power by almost force, I would say. And that is also why the public and the equity doesn't come, because people are not interested in that, but they think that people will be, because it's coming through the vehicle of a beloved franchise. For example, in Snow White, or in Moana as well, I would say. And with this one, I think now they kind of got used to using those things that were very successful to just continue to message ideologically without noticing that the public fully now almost has moved on from that. But they think it's still going to work.
And Jonas, all of this, and great points, Nat, all of this was made possible by the idea, perhaps to some degree correct, that Walt Disney himself had created a couple of things that are irreplaceable and they're unique, right? So Walt Disney World is the size of Manhattan. It's 40 square miles, maybe twice the size of Manhattan, honestly. And there's a once a generation kind of thing where people feel like, I got to take my daughter, I got to take my son down Main Street, USA. We got to see the castle. And so I think this company was seen as particularly unique in that it offers some things that maybe people are not willing to part with, even if this was used to socially engineer. Was that part of this as well, Jonas?
I think, even Iger has used that argument of the brand deposits and brand equity and all of that. And if we are using the economic principle here, they essentially made it clear to the audience somewhere around 2021 that we're taking everything out of the bank because we think we can do better with our current ventures at this point. They stopped drawing interest and they stopped that compounding, and they made it clear they're starting from scratch on all of that universal goodwill. And I would agree with what you said before, Pro, about they do need someone like Ron at the top of the company. And, I think that's an innovative idea to have a Jewish person as a media executive.
Jewish person who doesn't go to the movies.
It's about darn time, I say. It's about darn time. Folks, it's a fantastic Substack. Get over there and subscribe right now and read the article, Abandonment. You are going to, I think, have keen insight into what is going on with Hollywood. Ron, final thoughts on this particular issue?
If it were just about show business, I would say this is the best possible thing for the country. Hollywood has done so much damage. And if it all had to be built up from the ground up again, I think that would be fantastic. The problem is the fallacy of abundance is what operates our politics and our social choices. And we've got to start realizing that the world that we live in and the things that we enjoy didn't come out of nowhere. Air conditioning being one of them.
Pixie dust and air conditioning, folks. That's what Ron's telling us about today. We've reached the end yet again. But ladies and gentlemen, we've had fun today, have we not? And until the next time we get to do so yet again, be a friend to the channel. Click that like button. Share your thoughts in the dialogue down below. And if you're not yet subscribed, well, we need you right here on Team Pro. Until we meet again, keep learning, keep growing, and as always, keep having fun.